right, well, welcome back to the greater community. This is our second episode, and our heartbeat behind this show is just to highlight the ways God is working both locally and around the world. And today we're super excited to have with us Tekia Thompson and Michael Ray. They both do a lot of different things, but they work in relationship with Community Covenant on a project called the Jubilee Community Garden. And so we're interested to hear more about that. So welcome, guys. I'd love to have you introduce yourselves. Tell us a little about who you are and what you do. So we'll start with Tekia.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on your show today. My name is Tekia Thompson, and I do a couple of different things. One is that I work for a fair trade nonprofit organization here in town called 10,000 Villages. Hopefully you all have heard of it. And when I'm not in the store working on fair trade stuff, I'm actually in the field, in a garden or orchard somewhere, and I'm leading teams to glean and harvest the extra produce that is grown so that we can package that up and we can get that out to our hungry families. And so our goal is to get healthy food to hungry families in need, working with various organizations in the area, and I do that through an organization called After the Harvest.
Awesome. And Michael, tell us about yourself, my friend.
Right. Well, I'm a member of the college, or the church and the college, but I work at the Johnson County Community College. I work in the Center for Sustainability. I'm the project manager. I do energy efficiency. We work on acquiring solar energy. We do recycling, composting, and pretty much everything else that's hippie related. Yeah. And also sustainable ag is one of the things that I'm closely working with. And so that's kind of where the idea came for Jubilee.
Yeah, so tell me about just how did that idea, this is really, the garden started in your mind. So kind of tell us how this thing got started.
Yeah, so it's probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I talked to Pastor Johan about starting some sort of small garden where we could basically have a community garden that feeds folks. And it wasn't necessarily going to be the kind of community garden where we reserve plots. That they have one of those over in Lenexa. But what we wanted to do is be able to serve the community in a different way. And so basically started out with about 9 raised beds. And from that point, we really wanted to explore the idea of how we would grow the system and make it bigger, but also make it more available to the community.
Awesome. Awesome. So, so that garden's been, how many years would you say you've been at it, like growing it?
About 7 or 8 years.
And then it's changed quite a bit. So what are some of the changes that you've seen with the garden since it first started with, I know you were here, taking up sod, and some of that sod ended up in my yard, which I appreciated. But yeah, from being here, starting to pull up sod to what it is today, like how have you seen it grow and develop over the years?
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned, one of which is I shouldn't have gave you that sod. I probably should just reuse it because it's got a lot of good nutrients in that soil. So moving forward, we kind of learned from that lesson, and now we're utilizing compost a lot more readily. And then as well as that, I've expanded. I put on a nice shed that we can operate and have people get tools out of as necessary. So they don't have to bring their own. And then we went and expanded now 3 times. I can't give you the exact square foot, but I believe it's about 60 feet by 60 feet.
Yeah.
And then we're actually going to add a little bit more space this year, which was the space that's going to be right behind the new garage that's on the site. So that's going to be some great things to do. And then next year, or maybe the year after that, we'll take over the entire soccer field. No, just kidding. At this point.
Well, who knows? God-sized dreams. And so
That's right.
At some point in the last couple of years, your 2 paths crossed. So Tekia, you weren't there for day 1 of the garden, but you've been involved. So yeah, how did you get connected in this community garden?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the organization I work with, After the Harvest, I was assigned the field manager for that day to lead a team. And, they said, hey, we're going to be at this small community garden. I'd love for you to lead the team out there. And I'm like, oh, it's great. It's not far from my house. And I didn't even really know it was there. So this is super exciting. And so I got there and I was kind of leading the team and kind of what was growing and just kind of giving them an overview of everything. And this guy just rolls up on this motorcycle and starts taking over and telling me what for. No, I'm kidding. But Michael came up, and it was great because I was so glad he was there to give just kind of a history of the garden, like, what we're growing at the time, and, talking about the beneficial nutrients of everything. And then we were able to then help a lot out with weeding and cleaning up a little bit, but also harvesting that produce. And then we were able to take it to a lot of hungry families that day. So that's how we met and got connected. And I've been at the garden ever since, leading teams for gleanings. And then it just became more of a passion for me in that particular space, in that area. And Michael and I connected in other ways as well. So we've just been working together ever since.
Cool.
Well, and I think one of the coolest things I remember too was when you showed up and told me where the people were from. I believe it was 2 different companies at the time. Yeah. So that's the interesting about After the Harvest is they bring in outsiders who otherwise would never have known that our church was doing something like this.
Yeah.
And when she does that, we're talking multiple, there was probably 15 people at that time.
Yeah.
That was about 3 years ago. And then, but then the last couple of times you brought families along. And so it's been a really diverse group that gets to come out and check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to ask you to talk a little more about that, because I know, we've always kind of had a faithful core of workers in the garden, but kind of getting, recruiting people to work the garden, it was always a challenge, especially in the early years. So talk a little bit about what dimension that's added since Tekia started bringing, different groups in. Like, how has that really changed kind of
always
of that?
What happens when Tekia shows up? Oh.
Well, when she found out how cool I am to work with, she started bringing all of her friends. And by friends, I mean, so she knows people from everywhere, obviously. And that's how one of the reasons that we're well connected is she knows my brother from a different church that she used to go to. And then she then went to the Foundry. And so she's brought people from the Foundry, and she's brought people from the Baptist church across the street. It's kind of interesting from the standpoint of, before it was this core of 3 or 4 of us that were, and now she's brought along a couple of other folks and families that kind of are able to come out there on a routine basis, which has really helped out a lot. And I don't know as if I would have been able to work the expansion that we went through this year without that help.
So actually having those volunteers gave you a lot more ability to expand capacity and to start fulfilling some of those dreams that we've been talking about for years with the garden. So it raises a question, when Tekia, when you talk about gleaning and bringing gleaning teams, I would guess probably most of the people watching this didn't even know that was a thing. So tell me about, like, what does that look like for someone to be part of a gleaning team? Like, what is required? What is it? Yeah. How does somebody get involved in something like that?
Well, the cool thing about gleaning is that you don't have to have this, degree or major skill set or anything like that. You really honestly just need to show up and have a willing heart to do some of the work. And the awesome thing about it is the work varies, I've had families come that, are very skilled in gardening and have a green thumb. But then I've also had, moms and dads come with like literally a baby in a little, baby Bjorn, and they're like, okay, what do I do? But the beautiful thing about gleaning is that it's the opportunity to, see really how God works. You're digging in the dirt. Sometimes you're harvesting things that, may have a little bit of a blemish, but who doesn't, and then you can see that those things are actually nourishing and healthy and good for you. And we can get those to people in need. And the concept of gleaning is not anything that's new. It's just not anything that we talk about anymore. It's like we say, oh, we're going to go to the garden and we're going to get some stuff, or we're going to harvest some things. But gleaning is, as you know, this biblical concept of when farmers and growers were asked to leave the edges of the field for the poor and the need. And then they would come and they would glean and they would take that produce or what was grown from the edges. And that's basically, in a sense, what we do with our growers and the farmers that I work with. We're just like, hey, we are so thankful for, first of all, how you feed our community in your profession, right? And we love that you want to give back. And a lot of them would love to, donate or participate in things, but they just don't have the time. And so one of the ways they can do that is just say, hey, we're growing like 10 rows of corn or 18 rows of this. Why don't we go ahead for our purposes that we need, harvest and take, these first 5 or first 6, but then you can have the rest and you can go ahead and glean the rest of that and take that and give those to families in need. Or, we'll take the first wave and then you take the second harvest that comes through. All of it's still really good food. It may have, like I said, a bit of a blemish, but I think there's a lot of symbolism and beauty in that, because you can kind of show just really how God does work and how he can work and achieve things through anything. So yeah.
You say farmers. So how many places are you talking about? Like how many locations are we talking about?
Oh my goodness. How many farmers do we work with? I can't even count. I know there's got to be over 50 or so, maybe more, possibly, that we work with. I'm just thinking about the list, because I think about, we have farmers that are like big farms. We have community growers. We have gardens. We have, we even have people who, it's so funny. Like, we have a lot of people in neighborhoods that are like, hey, I moved in and I had no idea I had 9 pear trees in my backyard, or, or something like that. And they don't want to, they don't want to cut the trees down, but they also don't know what to do with the thousands of pounds of pears and apples that they're going to get in a season. And so they may take some for their family, but then they call us and we go and we actually glean their backyard. So I would say it's actually probably closer to at least 100 or more that we work with.
How do they get connected to that network? I mean, how does a farmer say, hey, I'm willing to be a site where people can glean from? How does that work?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about after the harvest, right? Our job is not just to glean, but our job is to also connect. And so we are actually out in the community, engaging the community in different, workshops and different events when we can have them again. A lot of times we were at a lot of different expos and things like that, but it's just sharing what we do as an organization. And it also helps the farmer in a lot of ways, because it's not just, hey, will you donate to us because we really want to feed hungry people. It also is a way for them to give back, but it's a way for them to eliminate food waste. Because if you think about it, if they don't have the capacity, if they don't have the volunteers, if they don't have the staff to, grow and harvest all of these things, they will grow a lot of things, but they're like, we just can't do it. We can't get out there and do any more. Well, that's when they know that they can call after the harvest and we can come in. We can take care of that. We can glean that. We can harvest that produce. And then they also know that, hey, we're not just taking this and doing whatever with it. We're actually taking it and feeding the community. So it's kind of an approach to feeding and ending food waste and feeling good.
That's awesome. So that kind of raises a topic, and I want the 3 of us to talk about this for a little bit. When I think most people think about feeding the hungry, they think about food drives, and typically when you have a food drive, it's non-perishable things, right? It's a box of Honey Nut Cheerios, it's a box of mac and cheese, it's cans of soup and stuff like that. That's what most of the folks that I talk to think about when they think about feeding the hungry. So can you guys talk a little bit about, like, why is this kind of such a huge need? Like, what is the need that you're meeting? What do you see as, hey, this is the gap that we're trying to fill with this kind of a service, this kind of a ministry?
Yeah, I kind of experienced that the first time I went over to Lenexa Pantry and delivered the first load of tomatoes or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we're so appreciative of the fact that they were going to have fresh produce, because they're so used to these fully processed foods that aren't necessarily healthy for you. And every time we brought it, it was just like, as much, keep bringing it. And I was not necessarily surprised, but just to see that, sure, they get fresh bread sometimes. It's still seconds, but just to get actual produce, and then my big concern was, okay, well, what should I be growing for you? Because that's really important when it comes to creating these community gardens that deliver to pantries. You don't necessarily want to grow kohlrabi. I mean,
No.
kohlrabi I've never eaten it, but I know it exists. But folks, they need to know what they can actually use and cook. So, and knowing how to is really important too. And there's organizations out there that try and help with that too, in terms of showing people or, giving people ideas on how to use certain things or what to do with them. So
Yeah.
the only sad thing for me is necessarily that the season really ends, in October. And at that point, where are people going to get fresh produce from? It just doesn't happen. So season extension is really important, but I don't know as if after the harvest is really doing a lot later in the winter. Tekia could probably answer that one.
Yeah, I think our season actually goes a little bit longer. We're able to at least make it to November. Sometimes I've been out in December, friends, and it is rough. But I've had that experience. But it's like, going back to what you said, Michael, it is a lot of people ask me like, okay, there are food pantries and they can get, boxes of whatever. And I don't think it clicks because we are, used to that. That's not in our wheelhouse. That's not in our lens. It doesn't impact us. And so if something doesn't truly impact you personally, then you don't get it. It's not to say that you don't, believe in it or, whatever. It's just like, oh, I don't really understand that because it doesn't impact you. But when you go to the different organizations, like Michael said, you deliver to, and you come in and they see boxes and boxes and boxes of things come in. And then you walk in and you have this palette, right, of tomatoes or cucumbers, or I'm thinking of squash and, the things that we've been taking from Jubilee to one of the locations I work with at an apple orchard, taking apples, which you would be shocked to see the joy and excitement on kids' faces when you bring in apples, because they don't get those things. And if you think about why they don't get those things, think about how you spend your money. If you have such a small amount of dollars, you are going to stretch your dollar, right? So you're not going to spend money, and this is not me speaking for everyone, of course, but you're not going to spend your dollars on something that's like, oh man, I can only get, what is that, 4 apples for like $5. I can get how many boxes of whatever, how many cans of whatever can I get for $5? And that may sustain you, but it won't sustain you for very long. We're growing things and giving people things that have dense, nutrients that will allow them, that will give them life essentially, right? That won't deplete them of that will, I think about the kids that we give food to that gives them nutrients so they can power their brains, so they can stay awake and they can stay focused in school. And so they can be strong and grow strong, And so in working with, the different growers and things like that, that's kind of where, my mind goes. And in terms of like how far we can extend the season, we can extend the season with as many people that are willing to help. Like if we have growers that are like, yeah, I grow through the winter, we want to talk to you. Would you be interested in helping us continue to feed hungry families through the winter fresh, produce? And, we also get the opportunity to work with some wholesalers who I think of like, maybe you guys know Cisco and CNC Produce and places like that, are willing to donate through those winter months as well. But it is very limited. And so any chance we can work with someone who is willing to extend the season to help, that's great.
Yeah, I think another thing people don't realize too about needs is what a food desert is. I mean, they may have heard of one, but they certainly haven't been in one. Yeah. Whereas someone like me, I've got access to transportation. I can get to a grocery store that happens to be far away. But for the most part, and I wish I had the map to show you, but through the Johnson County Food Policy Council, we've mapped it out, and there's these large food deserts that appear. And the only place people can get food from is the local convenience store. And they certainly don't have fresh produce. I mean, I think I've seen an apple and a banana out of one of the places, but the banana certainly wasn't local. So, I think that's one of the bigger issues that happens around food insecurity is these food deserts and where people cannot get the food that they need. And then they still have to spend that money on whatever the cheapest thing they can find in the convenience store is.
Right.
And kind of like what you're saying, Tekia, so that spools itself out because now we eat those, fruits and vegetables because of what they do for us. And so if you're consistently not getting that impacts, we talk about, on the big scale issues like education and people's, mental health and physical health and it's all interconnected to what you're putting in your body, right? So if you're always only putting in like SpaghettiOs into your body, or, you know, something that's like super processed, that has an effect, right?
Absolutely. And if you're doing that over time, it's just like, okay, this is what I'm used to. And it's interesting because, you know, Michael talks about kohlrabi, and we do, you do want to grow things that people know what it is when you bring it to them, because then if you don't, what does that add to? That adds to food waste, right? That's like, well, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to cook it. And if I need to cook it in some super fancy way where I have to have all these ingredients to cook it, I don't have the funds to do that. So I'm not going to do that. So it's going in the trash. And so we want to make this intentional effort, right? A community garden should be intentional in what you're growing, and especially in the community that you're serving, so that you can make sure that the best gets to those in need and it's fully utilized to its capacity and not just tossed away. And so I think one of the things I think is great about After the Harvest is when we do talk about the things that we grow. You know, one of the things I always tell people, hey guys, when you're out there today and you're gleaning whatever it is we're gleaning at the time, today I gleaned apples. I always say, you're extending your table today, okay? So when you go out there, don't put anything in your bag that you would never serve yourself or your loved one. Yeah. So today, everyone we're serving is your loved one. So think about it that way. And so that puts it in their mind, like, oh, I'm not just going to pick up anything. Now, if it has a blemish or something like that, that's fine. But a lot of people have this mentality of, well, they should just be happy to get what they get. Mm-hmm. And that's not who we should be. That's not who we want to be. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a good point too, because I think when you think about those other fruits or vegetables that are going bad, when people say I don't have a green thumb, there's so many things you could do. We could, if you know how to can, you know, and you can make spaghetti sauce or whatever, we can give you the really ugly tomatoes and they'll be just fine, you know. And so there's a lot of that kind of materials, or there's a lot of those opportunities that exist so often. You know, the number one thing I hear people say that when they decide they don't want to help is that, and I'm not faulting them for it, but they say they don't have a green thumb on it. That doesn't, you can water, because you don't need a green thumb to water. You know, and we'd be happy to set up a schedule at the garden where, hey, you're the person who's in charge of watering, and then you go there, you make sure it's well watered, you go once, twice a week. And so those are the kind of opportunities that we can certainly have people involved in the garden with.
Yeah, you can get out your anger, your aggression, and weed.
Yeah.
We always need that.
Right.
Yeah, your COVID anger.
Right. So a question could come up. You know, we have this garden, and I realize that, Tekia, when you are gleaning, you're gleaning not just at churches, you're gleaning kind of all over the place, but
sure.
You know, there's a garden and it's at church.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question could kind of come up in somebody's mind, like, how does what you're talking about connect with your faith? Like, what role does your faith play in this? And how can a community garden be ministry? Like, how do you see your faith playing into this passion? And how do you see this garden as, like, this is legitimate ministry?
I'll let you go, Michael.
Okay.
You started the garden.
You know, it kind of stems from one of our past, just recently passed sermons, which was to love the neighbor, you know? And so for me, that's the focus. It's no matter who it is, I want to love my neighbor, and I want to be able to provide for them in whatever way I can. And this is one of those avenues that I've been able to sort of get into, while at the same time, you know, enjoying what I get to do too. So it's, you know, when I think about nature, that to me is what God is. He created nature. And so I'm getting to spend time with him. I know I'm starting to cry. No, the idea that I get to be out there, for me, that's as close to God as you can get, is within the things that he's created.
So it's almost like a worship experience that you're experiencing God through doing the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Tekia? How does your faith play into this?
Yeah, well, and I don't know if you can see my little sign up there. It says, remember who you are and whose you are. It's kind of like a thing for me, but like who God says you are, who God's called you to be. And I think for me, you know, it can be like, it's a big thing. Like Michael said, it's loving thy neighbor, you know, who God's like, who can I send? Who can do this? And it's like, God, send me. I can do it. I can work with people. We can get people together and grow things and serve and feed our community. But it's also a personal thing, and it's a reminder of who God says I am and who I belong to. Because like I said, when I'm out there gleaning and, I'm taking this produce, like even Michael has said, like the ugly tomatoes. Well, how does society talk about that? Like we can't do anything with that. But no, we can do something with that. We can make this amazing, nutrient dense tomato sauce, right? It's not about, it's not Instagram worthy, I always say, but it is worthy. It's worthy work. And I think we can teach a lot of people to find their worth in God and in Christ through the garden by showing them, like, I know this may not look like a lot, but look what we can do with this. Look what this can become. Look how God can use this. And doesn't, that's always the example of, he doesn't use the people that are, on the top, the very, very top creme de la creme, he's always like, I want that guy. I want that girl. So, and I think I think the garden, especially Jubilee, is a really good representation of God's love for us individually.
Yeah.
And we can share that with other people.
Yeah. When you think about the Gospels, how many times does Jesus use agricultural parables or imagery when he's trying to talk about something spiritual? And part of that's just that was his environment, but he was very intentional about looking at something tangible to point to a spiritual truth. And I know recently there's a newer addition to the garden. There's some signs out there now so talk a little bit about what was behind the idea to add kind of prayer stations within the garden. Like, where does that idea come from?
That kind of came from folks, quite a few pastors that were involved in that. So it wasn't my thing other than trying to help, locate things. So, but I was super excited about having something out there. So there's 7 prayer stations. You can enter at the main entry, which is the arched entry. Go through it, and then you can eventually find your way to each and every one. It's a place to kind of sit and pray. For me, it's just nice for me to be out there, and when I'm sweating or frustrated, I get frustrated out there. So when that happens, you can sit there and you can look to a message and kind of refocus. So it's really nice for me in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that it's there because again, it goes back to, and I don't want to say excuses, but all the reasons why you can't be in the garden. Like if your spiritual gift is a prayer warrior, what better place than to bring a friend and to pray with them and to pray over them than at Jubilee with the prayer walk that we put in place. And so I think it's beneficial in that way as well. And I've seen a lot of people in that garden that I know don't go to community and I know don't go to Foundry or Lenexa Baptist and are learning and soaking it all in. And so it's been pretty cool to see that.
Well, and even
we've had a few of those instances where just strange. I mean, I know you had one, Tekia, and I had one too, where the lady was walking back from the grocery store. I assume maybe she didn't have a vehicle, but she lived over in the apartment complex, and she said, can I help? Is there a way? I've worked in gardens before, and I said, absolutely. Now, unfortunately, she didn't come back, or, maybe she just didn't know who to go to, but, those are the opportunities we want to make sure that they're open.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about even on the prayer side of things, like how cool would it be to have a prayer team specifically for the garden, even to pray over the crops, like may these crops bless the people who will receive them, bless the households, praying over the people who work in the garden. And as you've seen different people working in the garden, what are some of obviously there's the top kind of impact of the garden of just getting fresh produce to people, but what are some of the other kind of residual benefits that you've seen, or even between workers? Like what are some of the other kind of cool things that you've seen happen amongst those gleaning teams as people are working the garden? Like what are some other positive outcomes that have resulted that garden?
Yeah. Well, for me, I can tell you that it's a reminder that we don't have to work in silos and it's just our one thing. I'm very intentional when I do reach out to groups, and bring people together. You know, I want to introduce people. And so I think one day when, you know, Michael was there, he was like, who are all of these people? You know, I think we had like 30 people out there in the garden at one time. And I said, oh, well, this group is from this church and this group is from this area. And, you know, we had people come in from Brookside, and we had a couple people from North KC there that time. And so it was all these different pockets of individuals. And I think what we found and what they found is like, oh, we can expand our lens a little bit. We don't have to stay in this bubble, and not just with the garden, but I think just in life. I think the garden provides these lessons of, you know, we can expand beyond what we've always thought to be true, simply by working alongside people that we have never met or never would think to meet, because we never cross over this part of town, which is what a friend of mine said when she came over. She's like, yeah, I really don't get to the Joco side. And I'm like, well, this is where the garden is, so you're coming to the Joco side. But it was really fun to see that interaction, and to see a lot of those people have built connections and they've built relationships now. You know, I've noticed on Facebook, I'm like, oh, they connected as a friend, and now they're, you know, hanging out and doing whatever, and they know mutual people and they're getting involved in other things and sharing the word. And so it is really cool to see that happen. And it's also cool to see people who may have had their faith shaken or may not ascribe to anything to do with, you know, church or anything like that, be willing to come to a garden knowing it's located at a church, you know, knowing that, you know, there's this prayer walk, and, you know, there's this Christ-centered space that they're willing to walk in, which they haven't been willing to walk in any other time. They're not walking into a church building. You can forget that, but they're going to walk into this blessed space and do this work and not even realize how much God is working on them by being in there. So those are some really cool things that happen that are not anything to do with, okay, guys, we got to glean and we got to harvest this stuff. It's because while we're gleaning the garden, God is gleaning our hearts, right? And so that's been really cool to be a part of that and to see that happen.
I think I'm nodding my head a whole bunch just because of that safe space, that neutral space that it provides. It's amazing, I think, too. Wonderful conversation piece with folks who maybe don't know Jesus, you know, or they're against it because they had a bad experience or for whatever reason. But it's this, oh, I didn't know Christians were, you know, doing that kind of thing. And so for me, it's sort of this affirmation, I don't know if that's the right word, but to be able to sort of witness to people in a way that, hey, this is what I'm out there doing, and I'm a Christian. So I think it's always been really helpful for me for conversations with people who don't know Jesus.
Yeah, it really makes me think about, so I've heard in your language so far, you've both talked about kind of creation care and how like reducing waste and caring for the earth is something that is a part. And I know, you know, Michael, you kind of joke that those are like the hippie things, but you know, there is that language in Genesis in the Garden of Eden of like, it's temple language, right? That God is, you know, that the earth is God's temple. He isn't just like a building, like a room in a church building that's a sanctuary. Like the sanctuary is literally, so in a sense, it's like, well, maybe they might not be in the sanctuary in a church building, but they're in the sanctuary at Jubilee Community Garden. So that's kind of a beautiful thing. Yeah, and maybe even as you talk about, you know, your heart for kind of even the creation care aspect, like, yeah, how do you guys see that as, I mean, how does your faith play into that, into your desire to, because I think it's something that's important to both of you. Like how does your faith play into kind of that value? Like, where does that value come from of like wanting to care for the earth?
You want to go first?
Yeah. Me or you? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, it's interesting how my two paths, my two careers have crossed, because, you know, in fair trade are, you know, a lot of principles that we have in fair trade, but at the core of fair trade, it's putting people and planet first. You know, we want to make sure that we are taking care of people, giving them dignity, you know, lifting them up. And we want to do the same thing with the earth. We want to make sure that we're taking care, utilizing our resources, you know, that kind of thing. And that spills over into what we do with after the harvest, but it spills over into my life. You know, I am a people person. I believe that we should be doing life together. I believe in community, and I believe in extending the table and building community, however that looks. And I think there's no better example of how to build community than to look to what God has created in our, in the world, because, again, we're very much like, this is who we are and this is who we're going to spend time with, and only do this because that we're not going to, think about being a part of that group or whatever. And if you look at what God has created, like he, has created all these different variety of colors and spaces and terrain and all the things and how each works together, but they all have a purpose, right? And I think we can learn a lot from that, and in taking care of the earth and noticing that and learning like, okay, this has a purpose in itself, but it also works in harmony with this thing that has a purpose. And if the earth can do that, we can do that too, guys. I'm sure of it.
See kind of God's design like weaving throughout all of that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's important. I think he's shown us time again, that we need to take care of not only each other, but this earth that he has given us. So I think he's shown us that.
Yeah, that's such a good word. Such a good word. Anything to add there, Michael? Or I saw you nodding your head a lot.
No, I without getting political, I think from my perspective, I got into sustainability about 10 years ago. And so, I've learned a lot in that time, and whether or not people believe in climate change or
Yes,
we have issues, and a lot of those issues have to do with farming, gardening, and things like that. So floods and droughts and all these kind of things that can come up will, on one hand, we need to take care of earth because God created earth, but we also need to take care of people, which is really what sustainability is about. It's to make sure that we can move forward as a society and as people. And if we don't take care of earth, then that's going to decline as well. So like I said, I don't want to get too into it, but it's definitely one of those things for me that God's put me here to do something, and I'm just following that path right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the fact, so for folks that are watching that, this is all kind of new. The Jubilee name on Jubilee Community Garden is pretty new, right? This is not, it hasn't been, and it's.
We came with that pre-COVID, right? It was like a month before.
Yeah, like
we were in a Starbucks together without.
I know.
Right.
How dare we, right? But I remember that conversation sitting around the table and making the decision very intentionally to not call it the Community Covenant Church Community Garden, but to just call it the Jubilee, and Jubilee being from the Old Testament of kind of this idea of redemption, this idea of forgiveness, this idea of God's love and his justice pouring out, and the garden really representing a lot of that. So how do you all, so since that was a very specific move to not kind of put our stamp on it the same way we brand other things, how do you see the garden as maybe a tool to bring people together? I mean, you've touched on it here and there as we've been sharing so far, but between not just like the Big C church, how do you see it bring the church together? How do you see it bring people in interaction with believers and non-believers? So how do you see the garden being a kind of a unifying tool in our community?
I'll let you go, Michael.
Okay. Like I said, I think what we originally talked about was building this garden so that we could feed people, but with the intent that in the future we would be able to engage the entire community. And so we had actual thoughts on what that might be. And if it would have happened the way it was going to happen, it would have been that way 3 years ago because we were on a fast track. But, you got to get a lot more volunteers to make this happen. So we would love to see we expand to a point where we could have community gardens for the local apartment right next to us, so then they could come over, reserve their own space. At the same time, sort of talk about this idea of what I call tithing, in terms of food. So you grow your own plot, but then you give away what you don't eat, and that's, to me, that's the idea of tithing in a way that people can sort of grasp easily. So when that'll happen, you know, I think we really need to build up a reserve of volunteers that really want to see that happen. But, you know, I don't want to let go of a dream. I think it's something we can certainly do. And I think it's something that would really benefit us in terms of bringing, you know, people to God.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, Jubilee, you know, it's about obviously the food and feeding people, you know, physically, but I mean, there's this feeding people spiritually and holistically that can happen just by being out in nature anyway, right? Just by being, you know, in the garden and, you know, being in the sun and all of that stuff like that. And so I think a lot of people understand that. They may grapple with their faith, they may grapple with other things, but, you know, a lot of people get like, oh man, I just need to be outside for just a minute, you know? And so to have an opportunity and, like Michael said, a safe space, you know, I think that's what Jubilee has created that space for people to do that, and to have that opportunity to come. And like you said, you've experienced a woman walking, you know, I saw a woman walking across from that same apartment complex, and, you know, and her first thing was like, hey, what is this? And we got to talking about it a little bit, and she just thought it was so cool that there was this space that she could come and bring her kids. And that's the other thing. It's a space for families. It's a space for individuals. It's a space for groups. It's a space for anyone and everyone. And I think we don't have a lot of that, especially right now in the current climate that, you know, that we're in, you know, having a space that is inclusive for everyone to be at. And I think that garden allows that to happen. But there's also these little nuggets of opportunities that we don't think about. Like, you know, we're able to pivot and go along with what's happening. I can think about what's happening with COVID right now and how many families there are, you know, educating their kids at home. What an incredible time to just say, hey, you know, let's just get out of the house and grab our stuff and, you know, learn in the garden, you know, especially if it's something to do with, you know, the earth or anything like that, or God, or however it is. So I think it creates opportunities that we don't necessarily think about because we pigeonhole ourselves into that. This is this garden at a church. So just changing it to Jubilee, opening up that space, opening up that, again, you're widening your lens, right? So that we can invite more people, because, you know, go in and he was just like, hey, here's all the things you're doing wrong and all that stuff and this, that, and the other. He was just like, hey, coming to your house for dinner. Let's do life together. Yeah. And I think that's what we do at Jubilee. We do life together, and in doing that life together, connections are made with each other, and connections are made to God.
Well, and I noticed you mentioned kind of talking about COVID a little bit in a place to bring people together. I did notice, you know, when the stay home order happened, there were folks that were like, man, I want to go to the garden just because I've been stuck in my house.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's even that kind of almost mental health benefit of,
yes,
well, I'm stuck in my 9 to 5 sitting at a desk in my office, or I work from home now, or I'm home, you know, I'm teaching my kids, and like we're going stir crazy. So
yeah.
Well, I've got some actual statistics on, not that I can give you the numbers, but the amount of people who started back their gardens and actually tried to reserve community garden spaces skyrocketed. I just had a conversation today with somebody on a call, and she was with Lenexa, and she said, yeah, we were completely filled and we have a huge wait list. Whereas before I used to say, yeah, we might have some space available next year. She's thinking that's not going to happen. So these are opportunities too that we have. If anyone doubts that we would be able to fill space, I think we would certainly be able to do that. And there's plenty of other examples. We're not the only garden that's doing produce, trust me, as Tekia has mentioned. But you know, Lone Elm, there's Lone Elm Church has their own. It's way bigger than ours. God's Community Garden is another one that's out there, and it's bigger than Lone Elm. I mean, so we're still on the small level here, but I think we have a lot of opportunities just because of our location.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think that's a super helpful perspective to have, of thinking about the garden, again, thinking about this bigger picture of, you know, not trying to be this or that, but, you know, what role does this garden play in this bigger picture of what God is doing in Kansas City and in this? I mean, you probably have a better look of it with after the harvest, Tekia, being able to actually go to these locations and you see kind of the network. And I know, Michael, you sit on some of the boards where you can kind of see it, but as well, that I think that's just as the church, that's a very instructive thing for us to continue to think about is, so often we think about how do we get people to our church or in our sanctuary or in our place. And it's like, what is our role in the bigger picture? Like, I'm not trying to compete with Boundary Church. I'm not trying to compete with Lenexa Baptist. Like, we're on the same team. And so, this is something that adds value to all of that, not just to, boost up Community Covenant, but this is something that is a resource that's meeting a need and it's working in conjunction and collaboration. Like, we're not trying to outdo other gardens for the sake of winning a garden contest, right? We're trying to, work together kind of collaboratively to see people be fed.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the collaboration is that, Jubilee is, I'm always connecting people. And, we have Jubilee here, that we're working with, and things that we grow. There are places that are growing other things. And so Jubilee is connected with Cider Hill Family Orchard, and they are all apples all day, every day. And she's also growing sweet corn. And so in talking with her, she said, hey, I would love to give you sweet corn when we have it. And I would love to contribute apples to your harvest that you have for Jubilee, because what happens right now is that if there's something to glean and harvest every Tuesday, we're out there and we're harvesting for a group that we take to on Wednesday, who has been pretty in need for quite some time of fresh produce that they haven't gotten. And so to have another group come along that is all the way in KCK and to say, we want to partner with you, we think that would be great. And they totally go to a completely different church, but they also want to participate in this. And then we take all that and we go all the way to, 29th in Minnesota and are blessing families there with the produce. So, I mean, it really is such a beautiful thing that I think if more people can see that, like you talk about, then I think they would want to be part of Jubilee. They would want to be part of, the process and see in all its ways how it can bless the community.
And since we're dreaming big, and Tom, don't slap me for this, but what if we had our own pantry at the church? What if, right? And didn't, that was one of our sermons. What if? Mm-hmm. What if there was because the closest one we have to us is only open for 3 hours a day on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah.
So, what's the closest place? And obviously, Tom, you're well connected with what Lenexa is trying to do with homeless and, those issues. So I think that we really should expand and think about these things and at least talk about them.
Mm-hmm. And expanding your mind, because right now we're in Johnson County, and I can't tell you how many times people say, why are you bringing food to Johnson County? Like, we don't need it here. I'm like, well, and where do we even begin with that in terms of food deserts and homelessness and people that are hungry and need right here in our community, in our backyard, so changing minds, it's changing the narrative, I say.
Yeah. So we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I'm going to give you, this is your stage right now. I'm going to roll out the red carpet for you.
Oh boy.
If you really wanted to dream and you're like, man, sky's the limit. We're blue sky, dreaming right now. Budget is not an issue.
Oh no.
Volunteers are not an issue. Like what's the God-sized dream that you both have for what this garden is and what it could be and where it's headed?
Tekia, go ahead and go first.
Oh, no.
I'm writing mine down.
Oh, you're writing yours down? Oh my goodness. I haven't even thought, when you said no budget, that's what, now I have to imagine, I have to redefine here.
You might have some donors that are watching this right now. So
yeah. Okay. So. I think I would love to see Jubilee be a holistic thing of not only just, I would love to see it as an opportunity for education, for advocacy, and for giving back, right? We have this educational component of, working, or we have this give back component where we're giving families the produce that we're growing. We have the educational component of, maybe Michael, you talked about this, other people do this, but again, it's the transportation issue of getting to those places. So what if we did have that educational component of, hey, we've grown this. Do you want to know how to preserve it, how to cook with it? All those different things, how it nourishes your body. why you need it, that's great. And then the advocacy part of it, of going out into the community and changing that narrative and letting people know that, hey, this is something that's in your community that is in need, and we want you to join us and support us and those things. So I think a big picture, like having that be available, and then like some of the tangible things under it are like, I think we've talked about, like you've mentioned food pantry. I would love to see us have, like, and we've talked about this, farmers market opportunities for individuals in the community, you know, having space for people to grow their own and tithe back and give back. Yeah, having an educational space for families to come. I think there's so many tangible things that we can have under each one of those kind of, you know, categories of education, advocacy, and giving back. Yeah, so I would love to see kind of like that. I would love to see a holistic approach to this.
Well, she got pretty philosophical on some things, so I'll stay.
Yeah, I know he's gonna go like
on the infrastructure
some
piece.
Practical things.
Yeah, I knew you would. So this is good. Yeah, this is good.
Because you guys are making my day, being able to just put these ideas out. You know, I'd love to see the entire soccer field turned into this wonderful community garden.
Mm-hmm.
Half of it is sort of this donation garden, and we could easily not hire, but let somebody use that space to create their own business. And not, of course, I'm dreaming here, but you know,
we're doing.
They would be the farmer, you know, on that one half, and then they would be the advisor for the other half, which is going to be a community garden, and people show up. Yeah. So they all get to learn from this one person who's working the other side, you know. And so that's one cool option. The other one is, and Tekia, I've told you this before, but you probably haven't seen it. We have a commercial kitchen.
Oh, I can't even talk about it. I'm so excited.
in our building already, you know. So there's, you mentioned educational opportunities for people. Bring them in, show them how to cook what we're planning. Yes. You know, show them how to prepare meals there. You know, take all of those tomatoes that we're not using and turn those into spaghetti or whatever we want to. You know, see that on the store shelves, the community garden spaghetti. You know, it's Jubilee Garden spaghetti. You know,
yeah,
it's all these cool opportunities that we have. We already have some infrastructure for it, you know, and so I think that's something that would really be exciting. And then obviously having a food pantry would be really special as well.
Yeah, and in that pantry, that they're not, you know, on all these areas, you know, again, going philosophical, go infrastructure, but in all these areas, there's a dignity component, right? So it's not just, hey, we're saving you, you need this, but this is the only, you know, it's about, hey, if you're going to come to this food pantry, you know, maybe it's not a pantry, maybe it's a store, you know, and we set it up just like they would if they're going into McKeever's or a hen house, you know, it's giving just that little bit back that, you know, for whatever reason they don't have. And so I think there's opportunity there for us to really bless and be blessed.
What you're talking about is really empowering people, right? You know, so they're not just passively receiving services. Right. You're empowering them to choose the items that they're going to cook and use and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then also reminding them that it's, because this is the thing. It's like, you know, people are always like, I don't want a handout. And I can't tell you how many families that I've worked with. They're like, you know, I can work for this. I can do this. It's like, absolutely. And encouraging them to come back, you know, in some capacity at the garden, you know, if they have received any type of food from it, you know, to come back and be a part of it. You know, one of the groups we work with is Urban Scholastic Center, and giving them, you know, a lot of the produce that we've gleaned and harvested. And I can't tell you how many times they're like, hey, so when can we come out and glean, or when can we come out and help weed? Like, we want to be a part of this garden because it has blessed us so much. And so we have to give opportunities to be a part of as well, not just here you go, here you go, here you go kind of thing.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Well, I knew this hour was going to go fast. If people want to get involved with this project, and, you know, you may even have people watching that want to give and help these dreams become a reality, how do they get in touch with you? What's the first step to getting involved with this project?
Well, if anyone wants to pay for our sign, we need a sign for Jubilee. Call Tom.
Yeah. We actually do have a sign that's designed, right? And we do have a wood artist that would construct it. So yeah, we're just looking for some funds, a couple $100 to really do, because that's the idea, right? We want to just do this thing well. I mean,
Yes.
there is a piece of being in Johnson County that I think we expect things to look a certain way or to function a certain way. And so, I think sometimes, I know, Michael, when you first started pulling up perfectly good grass and putting down this garden, you could be met with some questions or some skepticism of like, man, you're ruining a gorgeous lawn with what are we doing? And so,
Right.
we want to, portray this picture of like, there is a beauty in this garden, and there is intrinsic beauty, but just adding, like, this is a legit thing. This isn't just like something we just a harebrained idea that, we're just trying to keep going, but this is a really legitimate ministry of the community. So funding the sign, that would be great. If they want to come and glean or come and, I realize we're getting to the tail end of this season, but if they want to get involved either this season or moving into the next season, how do they start? How do they get connected?
Yeah, they get a hold of me, get a hold of Tekia. We'll fit you in where you can. We certainly want to find out who wants to be involved, because the more people we can get involved, the bigger we can make it.
Yeah.
And the farther we can move forward with our big goal.
And if people want to learn more about just this whole idea of like sustainability and, meeting poverty with, is there like a website they can go to, or the resources that you would steer them to learn more about, food deserts and the value of this, so that they can kind of spread the word for you? Or is there?
Yeah, actually, if I'm going to plug Johnson County's Food Policy Council, there's some good information on there about all the issues that we really addressed. So if you go to Johnson County's government's website, search Food Policy Council, it'll pop up, and you can learn all the different stuff there.
Cool.
Yeah, and if anyone's ever interested in not just gleaning at Jubilee, but also with me or with our other gleaning team with After the Harvest, you can visit aftertheharvestkc.org and click the volunteer tab and sign up to glean. And if you specifically want to glean with me, just let them know you want to glean with Tekia, and I'll meet you out there and we'll have a good time.
Awesome. Michael, what's that Johnson County website? What is the
It's joco.gov.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming out today and to share your hearts about this. Guys, if you are interested in getting involved, we'll be putting the links in the description here for you to be able to follow up. But keep dreaming, guys. We thank you for your diligent work. I know you've got a great team also that is working there with you in the garden. So we're looking forward to God-sized dreams and God-sized outcomes out of the garden. So thank you so much for joining us. So we'll see you next week. Next week, we will be talking to Winston Frazier with Kick Ministries, doing basketball ministry in KCK. And so that's going to be, you want to miss that next week. And so these will premiere every week, 8 o'clock on YouTube, on the Community Lenexa YouTube channel. So we'll see you next week. Thank you guys for joining us. Take care.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye.